Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you've been following along in 2023, you'll know that I started really getting into non-fiction books. I like books in general, but I read one book in 2023 right at the start of the year, I think it was February, and it just catapulted me into the world of non-fiction. Now, I very much did not used to be a non-fiction reader. I love my books, I love reading, but I like to stick within fiction. But 2023 was the year that changed. So, I kept track of all the books I read. I believe it was 23 in total, which is insane. 23 non-fiction books. I read, I think it was 74 books in total, which is insane. I have my Storygraph wrap-up, which I'll link up on this side, I believe. But these 23 were the non-fiction ones, and I really struggled to find non-fiction books to read. Now, to be honest, most of these, if not all, were audiobooks. And the way I found them was by looking through my library app and just going through non-fiction audiobooks. But I did also use YouTube and Google and whatnot, so I thought if I make a tier ranking of all the non-fiction books I read, that will give other people who are looking to read more non-fiction an idea of which books I anyway enjoyed and which one I would recommend. So what I'll do now is I will put up the screen of my tier ranking and we'll go through it. So here we are. The categories, I've got 6 categories, are love, really good, okay, not great, don't remember, and irrelevant. I don't know if I'm going to need all 6, I don't know if I'm going to need more, but that's what we're starting with. So the very first book is Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. This was the one that sprung me into non-fiction, so obviously I loved this one. This one was very good, all about creativity, which is totally my jam. And it was just really interesting and clever, and I enjoyed the way it was written. Also, I'm not going to go too in-depth with any of these books, but I do have my monthly favourites where I often talk about the books individually, and also I've done some book reviews, so I will link the playlist of monthly favourites up on this side, and you can have a look at that if you want. The next book I just had a look is Think Before It's Too Late by Edward de Bono, and this one was such a shame because it was just, I didn't enjoy it at all, and I did make a book review about it separately, but it's going to go into the not great category. The reason, by the way, why I have not great rather than terrible or anything below that is because at the end of the day, these people are authors and I feel bad saying anything worse than not great. Next, we have Creativity by John Cleese, which I'll be honest, I don't really remember, so I'm going to put that in the don't remember category. I feel like it was okay if I remember correctly, but because I'm not confident about it, I'm going to put it as don't remember. Any Ordinary Day struck me. This one was the only book I've listened to, I think, ever, maybe, that has an Australian accent, because I don't like listening to an Australian accent. It's not a pleasant reading experience for me. But the topic of the book was just so interesting that I felt like I had to. I'm gonna put it as really good rather than love, I think. It's a tough one. I'm struggling to think. I don't know, because it was really good, but I don't know if I loved it, because I think the subject matter was so dark and heavy and sad, and it was an Australian accent. I think those things just worked against it. But it was a really, really good book. Next, we've got The Art of Decision Making. This one was disappointing, so I'm going to put that as not great. You might not know it from this video, but I am terrible at making decisions, and I was really hoping this book would help me out, and it just didn't really. And I think this was the same month that my father texted me something, which was a quote, and it was kind of to do with decision making, but not really. And that one quote, it was literally one sentence, it was a Dutch quote, just will help me so much more with decision making than this book. And so I kind of just felt, in comparison, it just wasn't great. Sorry. Maybe you should talk to someone. I'm going to put that as love. This book was so good. This book was not written as a non-fiction. It was very much written as a story. And it didn't really feel like you were reading about real life. It just felt like you were reading a book. And I loved the subject matter. It's from the perspective, it's written by a therapist, but they also go to therapy, and it's just about the different expectations and why you should go to therapy and why you shouldn't and what happens. And I don't know, I really loved it. I thought it was very, very well written, very clear, and a good story. I enjoyed it, obviously. A Short History of Nearly Everything by Bill Bryson. I am gonna say I don't remember it, or not great. I don't know. I don't know if it's more insulting to put a book as not great or to put it as don't remember. I remember it being a bit dry and not as interesting as I was hoping, but that's all I really remember from it, so I'm going to put it as don't remember. Next, Contemporary Left Anti-Semitism. I'm going to put this one as okay, but it wasn't the best. I feel like I can't even say much about it. It was just okay. The Icarus Deception, I don't remember one bit. I remember struggling through it and it taking me some time and it just being like nothing was staying in my brain as I was listening to it. So, sorry, but don't remember. The next book is The Woman They Could Not Silence. This is Going Into a Love. This one again was written very much like a story rather than a non-fiction, which I enjoyed. And the subject matter, it was so interesting. And it's just the kind of thing where you think, how have I not been told about this? How did I know nothing about this? It was just so good. It was so good. So highly recommend that one. Next, Erebus by Michael Palin. I like this one. I'm going to put it as really good. It did take me a little bit of time to warm up into it. And this was, I think, the only physical one I read, I'm pretty sure. Oh no, I can see one other. So obviously having a physical copy is always going to make me enjoy it more, and it kind of almost forces me to remember it more, I think. And this one kind of flicked between feeling like a story and feeling like real life, but it was just so interesting the way it was told. And yeah, I just enjoyed it. Next, The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green. This is Going Into 100% Love. I am a big fan of John Green. I am a big fan of his books. I'm a big fan of his YouTube. I like their podcast. So I'm a really big fan of his. But when he announced he was releasing a non-fiction book, I was not interested at all. I just thought to myself, I don't like non-fiction. I'm not going to read it. And I'd never listened to his podcast, The Anthropocene Reviewed. So I really didn't know what I was going into. The only thing maybe that I would have seen would have been a YouTube video which was in the style of The Anthropocene Reviewed. That might be the only way I had any knowledge about it. But because at this point I knew that I was enjoying non-fictions, at least some of them, I thought, right, I'm gonna listen to it. And I had to wait a long time for it to become available in my library, but when it did, I devoured this book. I think I read it in about 24 hours. It was just so good and so well written. It was just everything that's in my brain but put into neater words and clear, and I just loved it, obviously. Next, Containing Big Tech. Now this is a tough one because I don't know if I want to put it as irrelevant or as okay. I'm going to put it as okay because I think it's probably relevant for everyone. I personally am not that into technology anyway, and I'm not obsessed with it, so for me it felt a little bit like I didn't need it. But I do think it was a good book, and I do think people should read it, and it was very clear with how it wasn't like a story, so it was a little bit more essay-like, but it was very sort of, this is my introduction for each chapter, this is the bulk matter, and then this is a conclusion, and then this is an actionable solution to what I'm telling you about. And it was interesting, so if there was a category between okay and really good, I would probably pop it there, because I would personally argue that it was better than contemporary left anti-Semitism. Anyway, next one. I'm Glad My Mum Died by Jeanette McCurdy. That is Going Into Love. This book was kind of written like a story, not really though, kind of, maybe. There were about 100 and something chapters, and they were all quite short and small, but it meant it was really easy to read and very digestible, and I just really enjoyed it. The subject matter also was so interesting. I grew up watching iCarly, and also because I'm an actress myself now, and especially because I wanted to be one growing up, I was always curious about the behind the scenes of that kind of stuff. And this book just had it all, and it was so well written. I thought it was very clever. And I'll be honest, it was one that originally I wasn't going to pick up because I'm not such a fan of celebrity memoirs or anything like that. And, you know, I didn't feel like I wanted to read a book that was titled I'm Glad My Mum Died, but it was so good. And I'm very glad I read it. Next, The North Korea Journal by Michael Palin as well. I think I'll put this one as okay. I am fascinated by North Korea. I would love to visit it one day, so to be able to sort of live vicariously through this book was good, was nice. It wasn't amazing, it wasn't outstanding, but it was interesting, so it's okay. Next book, A Gypsy in Auschwitz. This was the only other one I did read physical copy, and this one I'm probably also going to put as okay. I don't really know much about the gypsy story, or anything about gypsies really. I don't even know if you can say that. I hope I'm not offending anyone. Obviously, I know so much about the Second World War, but very much through the lens of Jewishness and Jewish history. So to read a book about a similar story, but from a totally different side, was really interesting. But I think there was more I wanted to get out of it than what I did, which is why it's in only okay. But it was good, it was interesting. I feel like we need to not bash the okay category, because all 4 books there were good in their own right. But I'm pretty sure the next one's also going to go there. It's Angels of Death by Al Camino, I think it was. And I think I am going to put it in okay. When I saw what this book was about, I was like, this is so up my street. There was a podcast I listened to, I think back in 2019, called Dr. Death, which I loved. It's a bit sort of gross and somber and dark and everything like that, but I just like it. And I was hoping this would be similar, but it just didn't capture my attention in the same way. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't great. It wasn't bad, but it was just not my favourite. But it was better than the two that are below it, so definitely on the okay line, I would say. Outliers. I think I really enjoyed this. I'm going to put this as really good. I just thought it was interesting. I thought it was well written. It was clear, I think, if I remember correctly. It's so funny because the main thing I'm thinking about when I think about these books is where I was when I was listening to them. So Outliers, I was in Budapest, and there was another one that I saw earlier. Which one was it? The Woman They Could Not Silence. That was the day I was lost in Linz. That's when I started it, at least. And there's a couple of others that sort of have a connection in my mind of what I was doing when I was listening to them. But back to Outliers, yeah, I enjoyed it, and I liked the way it was written, and what it was saying was a bit, I don't know what the right word is. It felt almost like he was saying, right, what you want to do is impossible. But he said it in such a nice way that I didn't feel like it was impossible. I don't know. I enjoyed it. Next, The Day the Nazis Came. I'm gonna say this one was okay as well. Actually, this one would probably also go somewhere between really good and okay. And again, this was from a different perspective. This was, I think, from a British, I can't remember exactly, I think it was from the Channel Islands. I can't remember exactly, but it was again a different perspective on the Second World War and of being in a concentration camp. And it was very interesting. I just felt again like it could have been fuller, but I did enjoy it. So that's why it's an okay. And somewhere between okay and really good, realistically. Next, Jews Don't Count. I'm going to put this in really good, but maybe I'm being biased. I had actually read this book last year already, but I needed to reread it for university, or I wanted to, I didn't need to. And I enjoyed it a lot more the second time. I think the first time I struggled to retain the information, whereas this time, because obviously I was looking at it from a different perspective, more of it stuck in my brain. And I just think he makes a lot of good points, and they are points that I'm hoping to explore a bit more within my university degree. So yeah, I have nothing more to say to that, but I do think it's worth a read, even if you're not Jewish, especially if you're not Jewish, because there are so many ways in which anti-Semitism is prevalent without people realising, and I call it basic anti-Semitism. I don't think that's a real term though, but I just think it's worth being aware of. Next, Atomic Habits. This one goes into love. I have seen mixed reviews about this. Some people love it, some people don't really. I did. I thought it was very clear, very easy to read, very realistic, I guess. And it just made me feel really motivated. I feel like it's the kind of book I'm going to come back to and reread just to get that boost of motivation again. Because I just felt so ready to tackle life. Anyway, I really enjoyed it. The only thing that was a little bit annoying was occasionally it felt very much like self-promotion, but hey, he needs to make money somehow, right? Next, The Tao of Pooh. I'm going to put that as okay. I picked it because this was quite close to the end of the year, and I knew at this point I liked non-fiction and I love Winnie the Pooh, so I thought, wow, I found a book that combines them, I have to read it. And it was interesting, it was okay, it was nothing more than that. I liked the way that Pooh was included in the story, and I liked the way it referenced things from Winnie the Pooh, because I know Winnie the Pooh like the back of my hand, but that's it really. Next, The Comfort Book by Matt Haig. I'm gonna put this as a don't remember. I like Matt Haig. I read The Midnight Library by him, I think it was last year, and I loved that book. But I genuinely barely remember this book, and from what I can remember is that I didn't really love it that much. So we're just going to leave it as don't remember. And finally, the very last book of 2023 that I read was How to Make a Million Before Lunch by Rachel Bridge. And that is going to go in... I'm going to put it in okay. So we'll get rid of the irrelevant category. And the reason why I'm putting it in okay is because it was so different to what I was expecting, and it didn't really talk about anything that I can relate to, not even a little bit. So I feel like I can't tell you if it was a good book or not, but I enjoyed listening to it. It wasn't hard to listen to. It felt very clear and again quite reasonable and realistic. But don't expect to be walking away having an idea how to make a million before lunch. But I enjoyed it. So there you have it. Here is my final list. As I say, even the books that were okay were good. I definitely enjoyed those, and I would recommend them. Most of them. Probably all of them, depending who you are. So don't take that as bad. Maybe the bottom two. Obviously, if I don't remember a book, it's probably not great. But I did read a lot of books, so to be fair to those books. If you've read, especially those 4 books, but any of them, please do let me know. I'm really curious to know what your thoughts are, if you've read any of these, where you would put them. But that's all from me. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video, which I'm sure will be very, very shortly, hopefully. Bye!